Hey everybody, Tracy here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for clicking on this little video button and for deciding to check out what I have here to offer. So over the next several months, I am going to be doing something a little bit different. If you look back through the archives of my YouTube, you'll see tutorials, you'll see sketchbook explorations, you'll see some little vlogs, some travel vlogs. Marco and I travel every year for about 12 weeks and I teach art retreats all over the world. So this year we're traveling to Europe, we're doing a month of travel in Turkey, and then I'm teaching in 2 different places in Italy, in Sicily and Le Marche, and then I'm finishing up teaching a week-long retreat in Portugal, and then we're going to be walking a 2-week section of the Camino de Santiago from Porto in Portugal all the way up to Santiago de Compostela. So I'm really excited about that. So while we're away, I'm going to be sharing with you some videos that previously were exclusive for my patrons on Patreon. So I had a Patreon community for about a year and it was amazing. I loved it. I loved having that small community that I could share lots of things with, but I just had a little bit too much on my plate and I had to make the decision last August to let Patreon go so that I could show up in other areas like my Facebook alumni community, like here on YouTube, like Instagram. A girl can only do so much, right? And so my patrons, who were lovely and understanding about the whole thing, had asked me whether I could repurpose or share some of the material from the Patreon community, and that's what I'll be doing while we're traveling. So I'll do these little intros to the videos that I'm going to share, and so just ignore any reference to Patreon, ignore any dates that I'm talking about. For example, I think this video is from November 2023, so ignore that first little bit and sink your teeth into the content and the tutorials that I'm sharing with you. And so there'll probably be about 9 of these Patreon videos that I'll be sharing with you while we're away, and I'm also going to try and jump in and do a couple of little travel updates as well. So this video that I'm sharing with you today is a mixed media landscape. So I'm using some collage, some Neocolor, Caran d'Ache Neocolors, I believe a bit of pencil in there as well, maybe a little bit of acrylic ink, I can't remember, but I will kind of talk about it as I'm moving through the tutorial. I share a lot of tutorials here on YouTube. I also have a couple of freebies on my website at tracyverdugo.com, and then I have a whole bunch of online classes ranging from abstraction to faces to narrative painting for people who would perhaps like to explore writing a children's book. And so all of those are over on my website as well. And I try and create a diverse array of classes at all price points. So as I mentioned, I have some freebies. I have some that are coming in at $37, and I have them all the way up to a few $100s for the really extensive classes like story painting. And so I often find that students will start off with the smaller classes and then they'll make their way up to the larger ones and really, really expand their creative horizons. So that's my mission, is to get you creatively confident, to get you valuing your unique expression, to get you really to believe that you do have creative worth, that you do have imagination, that you don't need to compare yourself to other people, that what you have is an amazing gift to share with the world. And through the classes and tutorials that I share with you, I really hope that you get to that point in your creative journey. So as I said, today I'm sharing with you a mixed media landscape. I've based it on a photo that I took when we were traveling, camping and hiking in Canada in 2018, I think that was. It was an amazing, fabulous trip, and we hired a van and we took off for 3 weeks from Vancouver over to Calgary. Beautiful, stunning landscapes. So I'm sharing that with you today while we're off traveling in another landscape somewhere. I'm not sure what date this will drop, but enjoy, and please leave me a hello in the comments below. I love reading and writing back to you. If you'd like to join my alumni group on Facebook, come on over and do so. Anybody that's a part of my YouTube community is welcome to do that. So I'll leave that link in the description below as well. So enjoy, have a wonderful week, and I'm sending lots and lots of love out to you. Bye. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to be working from 2 photos that were taken when Marco and I took an amazing trip, road trip and a camping and hiking adventure for 3 weeks up in Canada from Vancouver to Calgary. So as we get started, I think it's always a great idea, especially if you're going to take different elements from a couple of different sources. It's a fabulous idea to create some little mini drawings to just see what elements you might take, where you might place them, how they might look compositionally, and to just play around with the different elements. So we've got this very distinctive mountain range and the shapes within the mountain range. We have a very clear foreground, and we have a middle ground as well with the little houses and the pine trees around the lake. This is Lake Moraine, which is just one of the most stunning places that I've ever been to. So just playing around with it. How can we make the most effective composition, taking different elements from each photo? So in one photo, the mountain is kind of off to the side, and in another photo, it plays center stage. And so, just take the time to create these little scenes and just to see what works best and what elements you might be able to use in the painting that you decide upon. Now, I took quite a while figuring out how I was going to work with this today, and in the end, as I mentioned in the intro, I just decided to take out a stash of mixed media papers that I have in a drawer. I don't tend to throw things out if I've got a failed piece or say a study that I've done and then I've created a bigger painting. I'll put the little studies away and then I'll cut them up or use them for collage later on. So you can see there that I've got quite a bundle that I'm going to look through, and I'm going to let the collage elements kind of direct where I go with this painting as well. I've pulled out a selection of different acrylic inks and acrylics as well, and I've kind of got those next to me. I try to minimize my palette these days. I found that over the years, I've been using a multitude of different colors and materials, and I'd often have them all around me spread out on the table, and would find sometimes that I was getting quite overwhelmed. So lately I've been working with more limited palettes. Not to say that I'm not still working in a vibrant palette, but often I'll kind of start out with a limited palette, start out with several colors, and then slowly add in other colors rather than throwing everything at the painting all at once, and then feeling like my head's going to explode. I'm just starting out a little more slowly these days, and it feels better. So having a look at these thumbnail drawings and the different compositions, I've tried several different compositions with the pine tree in the front, very dominant. It's going to be very dark, lots of shadows in there, and then just playing around with that middle ground with those other trees kind of in the center, and the little houses. Like, am I actually going to include the houses or just a suggestion of the houses? I'm not sure yet. It's just at this point it's mostly looking at just the composition, the balance between light and dark, and just the negative shapes around those positive shapes as well. So, just kind of looking at them all and seeing which one I feel might be the most successful, then making a decision based around all of those things. So at this point, I've narrowed down my selection of collage, and I've put aside the pieces that I feel are not going to work within this mixed media piece. I've pulled out lots of greens you can see the light and the dark and the midtones in the trees, and I've pulled out some darks for the shadows. I've pulled out a few pieces that have that beautiful turquoise of the lake,
And then in the actual shadows in the foreground, there's a little bit of lilac or kind of a purplish color. So I've pulled out a little bit of collage that has those purples in it as well. Sometimes you have to squint your eyes to see the color in the shadows, but when you squint your eyes, you can kind of see that there's a hint of purple or a hint of blue. So anyway, so the colors that I have pulled out are marine blue and Payne's gray, waterfall green, light green, yellow. I can't quite remember what that yellow was, but I'll have all of the colors listed down below as well. And I've got some teal in the golden fluid, and I have some matte medium as well, which is what I'm going to be using for the collage glue. So matte medium can be used as a glaze to thin out your acrylic paints. It can be used as a collage glue, and it can be used also to put a coat over the top of your journal pages so that you can then add pen or pencil on top of that. So I'm coming in with a blue-green in the Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2, and that will allow me to get a nice loose line in the initial sketch, and then it will actually be able to, if I want to, I can use a wet brush to dissolve it, to create a watercolor effect, or I can leave some of the lines, some of the edges a little more jagged as well. So just getting this initial sketch in quite quickly, and look, it doesn't have to be amazing because it's the working with these materials is very forgiving, because we can shift things around, we can re-sketch our lines, bring our lines back in if we lose them, we can paint over things if they're not in the right place. So try not to get too precious about your initial sketches. And even, you know, I find that even as you move through a painting, if some of the lines were initially not in the right place and then you correct them as you go along, I love leaving the evidence of those faint lines that are still underneath. I think it adds a lot to a painting to kind of see the history of the drawing as it's evolved. So once I have established that initial sketch, the first thing I'm going to do is to bring in my darker areas in the trees and in the mountain area, in the mid-ground mostly, to start with. And I'm using a color from Golden Fluid called Jenkins Green. The great thing about the golden fluids and the acrylic inks, and really any acrylics, anything with acrylic in the name, they will all be able to be mixed together. So you can use the acrylic inks to tint heavier bodied acrylics. You can mix them together on your palette. You can see there that I'm actually wetting some of the crayon and just losing that line a little bit in some areas and allowing some of the color to start to come into the lake area. So I've just added some Purple Lake acrylic ink and some Payne's Gray acrylic ink, and I'm going to use a mixture of those to bring that deep, deep purple into the shadow areas in the foreground. Remember, this is just your initial blocking in, and so try not to judge yourself when you're creating these initial stages of a painting. A painting's going to go through many stages, and you know, I always say to my students that if you were in the middle of, you know, making a recipe, one of your favorite recipes, you're not going to stop when you've just chopped up the onions and thrown the garlic in the pan and you know, and you added something else in, but it's 10% of the way to the end of the recipe. You're not going to stop and judge it right then because it doesn't taste like what the finished recipe should taste like, right? So same thing with our paintings as they're developing. Allow them to just be in whatever stage they're in without you judging. I mean, you can make an assessment but you don't kind of judge it and go down into the rabbit hole of like, oh no, it's no good and I hate it, because that just is a hindrance to your forward progress. So just focusing now on darks, midtones and lights. Now, a lot of artists do, well, you know, a lot of artists work in different ways, and I tend to skip around, which is just the way that my brain works. And other artists are much more methodical and some work from one side to the other. Some work with all the darks and then don't move into the midtones until the darks are all done. I tend to get distracted by shiny things, so I start with the darks and then the next minute I've got some white on my brush and I'm doing something different. So, you know, just know that we all have different styles, we have different learning styles, we have different ways of doing things, and that's okay. So I'm using a wide edge 1-inch wash brush. One of my favorite brushes to use with these inks, and at this point I'm just pulling out some more of that crayon to establish a little bit more color in the lake, and just really blocking in and filling in most of the page, leaving the sky fairly light for contrast. And although I'm pulling all of these areas in, I am going to be collaging over the top of some of the areas, but it helps to have a base painting down already when you start adding the collage in, and it'll just help the collage to integrate better into the painting rather than stick out. Like I always feel like I want to play a game of hide and seek with my collage. I want it to be there, but I want it to be kind of, I want you to have to look for it, and so yeah, oftentimes I'll try to camouflage it within the painting, and you'll see that as we move along. So you may want to let the painting dry a little bit, depending on how long you've been working on it. There may be areas that are already dry, or you might want to start just moving some of the collage elements around to see what might work in what places. So you can see where I've laid down that thicker piece of collage with the textural blue with the scratched marks in it, and that was actually painted on a lovely piece of handmade kind of a earthy browny red coloured paper. And so along that torn edge, it's given like a beautiful little glimpse of that warm colour, which I think is adding something to the piece at this point. So I've repeated that element in the water, and then another piece of that torn paper with the red edge up in the mountains as well. Whether or not it stays, we shall see. But for now, I'm liking it, but it may also influence whether I add some other colours to the piece, or whether it's enough just to see that little pop of red there. Bringing in the purples into those shadowy areas, and just rummaging through the pile to find the pieces that may work around this little painting. I tend to prefer a torn edge when I'm collaging, but that doesn't mean that I don't ever use scissors. Feel free to change your mind along the way. So here I found a piece that I feel might work better in that water area. I've just felt like the heavier paper, that heavier kind of handmade paper with the red edge, was maybe a little bit too heavy for the feeling of the water in the lake. It just was so pure and clear, and the other piece just felt a little heavy for the depiction that I'm trying to create. So I know that this piece that I've chosen has some shadows through it, so I may have to pull some color over the top of that, which, you know, that's something that you can do as well, is to glaze over any of your collaged areas to actually create a shift in color. So once you're happy with your placement and you've spent some time really moving the pieces around and trying them out in different areas, I want you to just pop a little bit of the matte medium onto your palette, and then you're going to use a brush You can just use an old raggedy brush if you like, to lay down some matte medium on the paper first, lay your piece of collage on top of that, and then with a little bit more watered down matte medium, pull another layer across the top so that you get any texture out, and that so that you get the edges really sticking down well. And just continue on with that until all the pieces have been applied. Don't worry too much if you are adding in some of your collage over some of your sketched areas, because we're always able to come back over the top and strengthen our lines again, redefine areas that we've lost, shift things. Again, you know, it's just such a forgiving medium, acrylics, because you can always come in and change things up. So at this point I decide that I will add in a little bit of more of the warm color, using a crayon, a little bit of orange. I'm not quite sure as I'm doing it whether it's working or whether it's completely successful, but again, as I mentioned before, I don't need to judge the piece right now because there are always things that I can do to push an element back. Once I've laid it down, I can't get rid of the orange completely, but I can work in over the top. I can perhaps leave smaller glimpses of it, so that it's not as much, you know, if I feel like it's too overbearing, I can push it back a little bit. So, you know, you can always work with what's happening on your piece. It's just like, I don't know, sometimes I feel it's like a dance between you and your painting. You know, you're speaking to it, it's speaking to you. You're figuring out, you know, whether what you just did made it better or worse, or is there something else that you could do, you know, to kind of balance things out. It's always, you're just making decisions the whole way. And none of them are right or wrong. They're just moves that you're making, and then you make another move and another move and another move until finally you say, aha, okay, it's right. And or you get to the end and you go, okay, that was a good experiment. Here's what didn't work. Here's why it's not successful. And next time I'm going to do XYZ instead. So, you know, don't feel also that you have to have every piece be a masterpiece. Learning is about creating, making mistakes, trying different things, happy accidents. Oh my gosh, happy accidents are my favorite thing in the world. So, you know, the amount of times that I've had epiphanies out of a bottle of spilled ink, or, you know, something that's gone completely wrong and then I've turned it upside down and turned it into something else. Allow yourself to be okay with making mess, with making unsuccessful pieces, with having accidental happenings that lead to new possibilities. So here I'm adding in some more darks. So you can see I'm toggling back and forth, but adding in some more darks here. I guess you could say that this is probably, when I look at it at this point, it's probably what you would call the messy middle. Even though it's more towards the end of the painting than the middle, we're probably about 2/3 of the way through, it still feels like it's at that place where you could look at it and you could go, oh my god, what have I done? So let's just see what happens from here. But again, don't judge yourself too harshly, just keep moving through. So here I'm using a mixture of Jenkins green in the fluid acrylic and Payne's grey in the acrylic ink to once again bring back the line of those pine trees and to strengthen those areas of the foreground that were a bit wishy-washy, that were kind of just blending into the background. So bringing in the darker tones of those trees again, and then we'll move towards some highlights in a little while. Towards the end of a painting, I spend a lot of time really pushing the contrast. And what I mean by that in this context is pushing the contrast between dark and light. So you'll see I've added more white ink up into the mountains, and then I'm bringing deeper, darker areas into the foreground, lightening up the lake, and then playing around with the darks and lights in the foliage in the foreground as well. So that's something that I'll do towards the end of a painting always. It's like, for me, if everything is just too mid-toned, it's just not working for me. So I always, look at, okay, where can I push those darks and lights? One of the ways that I can see whether I've done this successfully is to take a photo of the piece where it's at, and then to pull it up on my phone and to put it into grayscale. And when I put it into grayscale, I can see if everything is too much of a muchness, if everything is too much the same, and that there's not enough contrast between dark and light. I know I have to go back and work on that a little bit more. So adding highlights in here, and you can see it's really starting to come to life now. This has been a fun piece to work on. I'm so glad that you guys voted on our little poll, and I'm so glad that this is the one that was chosen. I was kind of pushing towards the monoprint myself. I wanted to play a little bit more with that, but perhaps we can do that another time. This is very different for me in the way that I normally would work or would approach a painting. So it's been great for me to explore some new techniques as well. And, I can sit back at the end of this piece and I can look at areas that I might have done differently, areas that I might have changed. I feel like just looking at the piece, there are several things, and maybe it's helpful for you if I kind of tell you in the composition what I might have done differently as well. So definitely I think I would like to try the large pine tree in the foreground. I would like that to be even more imposing, to give us a sense of really looking through. And so I think I could have actually had it coming out a little wider at the bottom and then even going up higher so that it was actually crossing the line of the mountain and actually extending up into the sky. So I think that would have made a difference. And I really like the foreground. I like the little pops of orange that I've popped in there. I like the foliage and the contrast between dark and light. I feel like the middle pine trees, there's something there, and still haven't worked out what it is. A little wishy-washy to me. I like the mountain and what I've done there. So there are elements that I am enjoying. It may be that I might like to work on another piece and try it several times. So, you know, don't think that just because you've done something once, that's all that you need to do. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I really loved doing it, and I can't wait to see whether you guys have a go as well. And if you do, please post in the VIP Facebook group. Okay, bye for now.